Latest Planet X 2016 breaking news. Ed Dames, Black Swan song. He says Planet X is real. And here, folks, listen to this cutting-edge interview with Marshall Masters here first at Leak Project. Now, we get into a bounty of gourmet information, and not only do we talk about Project Bluebeam, the artificial sun theory that's going around right now, we talk about the future of survival communities after the markets and economies hit the fan. Not only do we talk about that, but we get into when Ed Dames says we're going to be able to see Planet X, how big it's going to be when we see it, how it interacts with the sun, the magnetic fields, cosmic lightning, what the pole shift will actually be, discussions on the Earth core heating up because the sun is interacting with Planet X, tons of volcanic activity, Yellowstone, how long the orbit's going to last, according to Ed Dames. And then we get into some real saucy information, and Mr. Masters talks about if you ever bring the Anunnaki and Planet X together in one hypothesis, essentially with good data points, that's when you really upset certain powers that be. Now, whether those people are Anunnaki, reptilian shapeshifters, men in black, people in a certain mystery school, or just certain factions that don't like other agendas, I have no idea. I'm completely agnostic to that. And Marshall brings his testimony to the table on what's happened to him when he's brought books out that put both of those together. So this is a great podcast. Enjoy the presentation. Once again, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channels, youtube.com/clandestine Time Lord. Also, the William Wallace channel. And, of course, leakproject.com. Be the change you want to see, folks. This is Rex Bear. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a real treat for you today. We've got Mr. Marshall Masters, YOWUSA.com. Marshall, it's great to have you on the show with us here at the Leak Project. How the heck are you?
I'm great, Rex. It's good to be back on. Been a long time.
It has. It's always nice to speak with you. And before the show, you said, Rex, I'm going to give you information that is absolutely huge. This is going to be the biggest show you've ever done, so we're going to get to that in just a minute. But before we do, I want to bring out a couple of new theories that have been passed around a lot on the internet lately, and it, in my opinion, might be some type of diversion tactic, wag the dog, red herring type scenario. And I'm not saying it doesn't exist, yet I think that what people feel that it actually is doesn't exist, if that makes sense. So what I'm referring to is these theories of what people are seeing with a lot of these pictures they're taking when they're trying to get the infamous Planet X or Nibiru or Red Kachina or Wormwood. And there's this theory on the net now that what they're seeing is an artificial sun, or when we actually look out of the atmosphere and we're not even looking at our sun anymore. It's just a hologram, or it's some type of patented technology. And I've seen plenty of patents for a sun simulator, yet that doesn't mean that what people are seeing, in my opinion, is a artificial sun. So if we could kind of get into that, I think that that's important. And then we'll talk about this just cutting edge info that you're going to bring to the table here today at the Leak Project.
Sure. Well, the artificial sun, in a nutshell, is a red herring. This is a disinfo rabbit hole. Now, is this technology possible? Absolutely. Has it been patented? Parts of it have. Does it bear a resemblance to other things? Project Bluebeam. Project Bluebeam is operational and it is sinister, yes. But this artificial sun is a red herring. If you take a look at when people are talking about this, they're focusing on the projectors in the spacecraft, all right? But they're not talking about the environment in which these spacecraft have to operate, because that's either going to be in a low Earth orbit or in geosynchronous. So let's talk briefly about those two. If it's in a low Earth orbit, well, that's International Space Station. If you have a reasonable viewing sky, you can see it going overhead. It's, an interesting thing. And as a ham radio buff, your license includes the ability to talk to the astronauts on that station, which is really cool. But in low Earth orbit, it's moving through the sky. And that's a real thorny problem because if you're going to say it's an artificial sun, it has to move through the sky or hold in position, if you will, like a sun. The second thing is that let's talk about geosynchronous orbit. Now, for those of you who have cable television, your cable TV has always come down, for the most part, for several decades through geosynchronous satellites. And these are satellites that orbiting at quite a distance, and they're fixed relative to the Earth. And so if they were going to do this artificial sun technology and maintain the appearance of an artificial sun as it would move through the time zones, they would have to have several spacecraft in orbit, in geosynchronous orbit, to do it. And then there's just simply the scale of it, If imagine you're standing on the beach and you have a pinch of sand in one hand and a beach ball in the other. All right. I mean, that's Earth and the sun, relative size in a very rough comparison. So to create a sun in the sky as an object, no. I think that this is a red herring because, it goes to something I've often said. If you're just asking, when am I going to see it with my own two eyes, then, you're being led down the garden path. And the reason for that is you're allowing other people to give context to what you're seeing. You don't trust your own opinion. And that's when it's dangerous because the elites are going to want to think that it's not going to be something that is a clear and present danger, which an artificial sun is not going to be a clear and present danger. So this is a red herring. I expect more of this kind of nonsense as Planet X system is approaching the core of the system.
Absolutely. And there's also, I know you've been doing a whole bunch of reconnaissance and research into different locations to set up a solid establishment for when things go wrong on a global scale, country scale, etc., that you'll be as prepared as possible. And didn't you recently go out to Kalispell, Montana?
Yes, we did a reconnaissance last month, and I would like to Mark Slaw, I'd like to say thank you for help on that. And we went up there. It was exhaustive. We spent several days in the area looking around. Kalispell, thinking of it more as a staging area where you would go there and then go from there to something more remote. In terms of it being a survivable area by itself, Kalispell's in the greater area, and it's incredibly beautiful up there, and the air is so beautiful. The water is so sweet. And I can understand why those folks want to keep it that way. God bless them.
Did you go to Glacier? Sorry to interrupt.
Absolutely. By the way, if anyone goes up there to do Glacier, they got the Red Bus tour. It's an all-day tour. Oh, if you do the Red Bus and you come back and you're not totally in love with Montana, you have a serious problem.
Oh, yeah. I would concur, man.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that was absolutely wonderful. But Kalispell itself, if you look at access, other cities will have ground freight, they'll have air freight. If they're along a coastline, they're going to have shipping or a major river. Kalispell pretty much is dependent on the rail lines going in there. So if the rail lines are severed during a cataclysm, it's going to be pretty hard because you got 30,000 people in that metroplex area. So that is not necessarily going to be the greatest place to survive, but it's a launching point. The thing that we found most interesting was the xenophobia up there towards preppers. Because there is a huge community of preppers already in place up there. A good way to, kind of give it a dimension We were at a local Army Navy store, and the owner told us that he was down to one box of MREs. It's his biggest selling item. And that he found someone in the South that had a warehouse full of these things and ordered a 40-foot truck, I mean, stem to stern, completely filled with MREs. Had that shipped up. They sold that whole truckload out in about 2 months.
That's pretty good. I mean, that's a whole truckload. If you're figuring that 40 feet by 8 feet, approximately 320 square feet worth of, yeah, that's great. Somebody's got a few bucks.
There's a lot of preppers up there. Now, the thing is with preppers, the conventional preppers, is that I think that people up there have a xenophobic fear of them, and Rex, I think, is justified. And here's why. You're going to have a lot of the preppers who are just good, kind people. They'll be good neighbors. But then there's a lot of them who know a lot more about ballistics than they do about the Bible, and they say clever things like, if I see you in my scope, I own you. Those are worrisome people, because once the game is gone, once the food has all been consumed or stolen, and it comes down to you're hungry, and it's either tree bark or long pork. Long pork is what they call human flesh because it tastes somewhat similar to pork. In other words, within the conventional prepper community, there's a subset of that community that could very well become the first cannibals of the tribulation. And this is what they are terrified of up in Kalispell. Absolutely terrified.
You know what that's reminding me of, Marshall, is I'm thinking about the films recently that have came out called The Purge. I think they're on like the third one now. There's a new series out on Sci-Fi Channel called Hunters, which is basically an offshoot of The Purge, where if you watch the film The Purge one night of the year, people can do whatever they want. Anything, and they can get away with it. If they want to be psychopathic, I mean, it's just ridiculous. And I think to myself, why would people want to do that in the first place? But this movie makes it like, oh, it's the right thing to do. If you're a part of the purge, then you're helping out the economy, you're helping out the country. But it's just one night a year, and it seems to me that if things do get to the point where people have to look for other food sources, and you've got those preppers out there that, like you said, know a lot more about ballistics than the Bible, and they turn in, they just think about themselves, nothing else matters. That can be pretty frightening, and there's got to be a balance there. I mean, if it gets to that point, then there's going to have to be factions of good that also know how to protect themselves.
I absolutely agree, and there will be ways to deal with that. And so, yes, there'll be cannibals, but the hunters will be hunted. And my belief, and this is what I espouse in my newest book, Surviving the Planet X Tribulation, a faith-based leadership guide, is that conventional prepping, and I don't care how you do it, is a failed strategy. Now, you have a lot of folks, and it's this me and mine approach, and just a handful of people. Well, you're not defensible in numbers. You're a very soft target. And I don't care how many fancy AR-15s you have. Your numbers are going to make you a soft target. So if you do have the ability to afford a deep underground bunker and stockpile it with 2 years of food, you're just going to come up to become a new food source, and you'll be hunted or you'll be dug out. What I maintain in Surviving the Planet X Tribulation, a faith-based leadership guide, is that you need to have faith-based communities of 100 people or more. Now you have defensible numbers. Now you have people that are pulling together, walking humbly with their God, and to make a difference. It's not about, for conventional preppers, it's all about the end of this civilization. That is a very short-sighted view, because we're looking at a tribulation that'll go 10 years or more. So you have to take a long view that is going to inspire hope for the future and help us to maintain our noble virtues. And with that, you need to think about becoming a clean slate for the beginning of the next civilization. And in my book, one of the things I say is that it's just not enough that you would grow food to support yourself. You need to think about growing 10 times as much as you need so that you can help your neighbors around you and that you can create extended satellite communities of support, which eventually will then become, more about defense and less about the food as they start having the ability to feed themselves. And this is the way that you're going to be able to defend yourself against these gangs, marauders, cannibals. There's going to be a lot of nasties. There's going to be the Mad Max types. And so if it's just you and your family, I don't care whether your virtues are good or bad, your numbers are small. And you're going to be hunted down. And I think if you look at the movie The Road, and there's aspects of that really kind of are a little editorialized as to what actually would happen during such a time. But
scariest movie of all time.
Scariest movie of all time. But it really does show you that, the cannibals are hunting in numbers and their prey are few. And they hunt them down. Now, if you're in a community of 100 and you're faith-based, that's really important. It's all for one, one for all. And the community has, very simple rules. Everyone works, everyone defends, and everyone participates. These kind of communities are going to mobilize and they're going to have resources. You will have folks that have leadership skills coming out of the military, retired military, folks that have had combat experience, understand how to set up defensive positions, how to do reconnaissance. And I can see where you're going to have what I call noble warriors of the light. And these will be people who know how to, form a long-range team, go out, and actually they will hunt down the cannibals. They're not going to wait for them to come to the communities. They're going to go out, find them, and hunt them, and take them down like wild dogs, and rightfully so.
Certainly going to need to be in place if it does get to that level. And I know that there was some remote viewing done by the Farsight Institute recently where they're predicting some pretty serious stuff. And also, I know that you recently had an opportunity to visit with Ed Dames, and I mean, he is a very well-respected remote viewer as well. What's going on with the future of our economy? I mean, and not only economy, but what's going on in the future of our planet here? I mean, do you think here within the next couple months, or what did he see that?
Well, Ed Dames, and there's been a lot of talk about this, and on yesterday in Las Vegas, he did his Planet X Revelation seminar. And this morning, I was given an exhaustive debriefing by an anonymous and trusted source. And so I'm able to actually go through this. My wife, Jennifer, was with me, and she kept detailed notes, and I can go through it. Let me just give you a quick background on Ed Dames. And I was in last year, he was giving an RV course in Reno, and I took that. And a shout out of thanks to Gloria up in Washington State for helping to arrange that. And at that time, I handed Ed a copy of my book, Being in It for the Species. We shook hands and we talked. First thing he says, "Oh, I've heard your name quite often." And he did his kill shot video, first one in 2004, and I had watched it just the night before attending that. And I just said, "Ed, in 2004, you nailed it. On a broad brush basis, you absolutely nailed it. It's consistent with what you said back then." And it wasn't pleasant for him to have that acknowledgement, and nor was it for me. This is not something you derive any pleasure from. For those that say, "Well, were you really there?" Ed did Exposing the Agenda. Yeah, let me hold that up for you. And for those of you who have that video or are going to buy Ed's video, Exposing the Agenda, if you go to the very end of it, he gives me a very nice cameo. There I am in his class, and I'm easy to spot because everyone else is facing forward and I'm turned sideways and facing him. And what Ed did yesterday in Las Vegas is, in a word, courageous. He's announced that end of August he's retiring, and so this was a swan song. And before I give you a detailed point by point of what Jennifer took in the notes this morning as I was interviewing and debriefing my source, is I'd like to send a personal message to Ed. And Ed, we've shook hands. We've looked in each other's eyes. I see a good man. And I see the torment. One day you're going to meet your creator. And mind my words, you're both going to know. You kept the faith. So, enjoy your retirement. You earned it. God bless you. Give me a second here.
Absolutely, Marshall. You know, and Ed, I've known about Ed. I've never personally met him or talked to him, but I've definitely heard his talks, and he's he's got a lot of knowledge and many things I'm sure he has seen people can't even imagine. So that's great that you guys had an opportunity to talk like that. And man, did the Swan song, I mean, must have been pretty powerful for you to get kind of emotional like that, Marshall, and I certainly appreciate you being here with us and sharing this with us.
Well, he actually only spent 40 minutes talking about Planet X, but in that 40 minutes, he really covered ground. It was important what he said. Very important for everyone to understand exactly what he said. Because in the search for Planet X, the pursuit of truth on this topic, if you're a Planet X researcher, you have the right to pursue the truth right to the bottom of an unmarked grave. I'm not joking. I'm dead ass serious. This is a get hurt kind of a thing. And you're always pushing the edge of the envelope. I have for years, and it's punishing. I've been pummeled many times, but I persist. What Ed did yesterday was something he could have only done as a swan song, given his position. And, I talked about it earlier because we had seen when he first started promoting, he'd used a graphic from Gil Broussard, who does Planet 7X. And when you hear this debriefing, it's very clear that, he blows Broussard and his 7X theory out of the window. I mean, which I've already done. In fact, what Ed is saying corroborates over 75% of the position I have maintained in my last two books, Being in It for the Species, The Universe Speaks, and my most current book, Planet X Tribulation, Surviving the Planet X Tribulation, a Faith-Based Leadership Guide. So with that, let me give you point by point of what we have and what he talked about, what he was willing to talk about, and I think also of interest is what he was unwilling to talk about.
Okay.
He talked about it in two sessions, 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the afternoon. According to my source, it was very unstructured. He mostly took questions and went on many tangents, followed a lot of rabbit holes, almost like there's a squirrel. And so in this, given his position, he can only be as honest as he can be. And for those of you out there who think that it's a wide, wonderful world and we can tell it like it is, no, it's not a wide, wonderful world. And I'll give you an example of that later. But now, let me go through the notes that my wife Jennifer prepared for me.
Okay.
And by the way, in this video I showed earlier, I'd like to have a call out of thanks to Deanna in Montana for sending me that. All right, here's what Ed said about Planet X. It's real. It's inbound. He said, we think it's a planet, but we don't know what it is. All right. He knows what it is, but he has to be cagey at this point. He says December 2017 is when we will see it in the sky. Then he talked about Velikovsky, Harrington, and Farada. I have spoken of them in my work, and I featured Harrington and Farada extensively in my latest book, Surviving the Planet X Tribulation. He says that Planet X will interact with Earth's magnetic field and weaken it. Well, that's the magnetosphere is already weakening, and that's weakening. And this is something I've maintained exactly the same in my last two books.
Can I jump in real quick on that note?
Sure.
Could that be a reason why the radiation levels are slowly increasing over a periodic timetable? For example, the past 3 years, we've talked about this before, the radiation levels in San Antonio have increased by 50%. And earlier today, they were at 0.13 microsieverts. And even though that isn't an alarming amount, that's almost double what it used to be back in 2013.
Yes. In Surviving the Planet X Tribulation, I have a section in there about ham radio communications and how to use them. And I think here's a little bit of evidence that really highlights the effect of this and how it's been actually coming for a long time. If you're doing ham radio, there's HF, and that is, going to give you long reach. All right, that's long haul communication. So you're talking to other people on, far, far away across an ocean. Then there's VHF and UHF, and that's more of the local stuff. But in terms of HF, back in the 1940s, ham radio operators were basically building kit radios, and they were very simple. But it was also called a golden time. And the reason why is HF has to bounce off the ionosphere. Well, back then in 1940s, the ionosphere was very healthy and robust, and using simple equipment, it was very easy for them to bounce signals. To give you an idea of that, if you remember the movie Tora, 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 one of the reasons why they didn't get the word to the Pacific at Pearl about the impending Japanese attack was atmospherics. They couldn't get the bounce going. But nowadays, if you're a ham radio operator, you have infinitely more sophisticated equipment, but the bounce is very weak as opposed to back then. And so the ionosphere is no longer anywhere near as strong now for ham radio operators as it was a half a century ago. That being said, in the book, what we say is a half a century after, or even sooner after Planet X heads back into the southern skies, HF is going to enjoy that good time of ionospheric bounce. And that's going to be important for pulling different people around the world together and helping them to communicate. So, yes, this is part and parcel. There's many different facets of what is happening, the magnetosphere weakening. During the pole shift, this is going to be a time when you do not want to be on the surface. You will be the proverbial poodle in a microwave. So, the thing, did that get it for you, Rex?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Next thing is Planet X will interact with the sun electrically, the kill shot, and with Earth. Now, this was something Ed said back in 2004. And my wife Jennifer writes our science articles on our site at yowza.com, YOWUSA.com. And you really want to follow those because she actually took a screen capture of Ed pointing to his illustration of Planet X passing, or as what we say in our book, Nibiru passing between the Earth and the Sun. And when he's saying interact with the sun electrically, understatement. The kill shot is a solar sprite, basically cosmic lightning. And you could say, well, the Grand Canyon was the result of water erosion, which, that always kind of like, does that pass the smell test? But look at Val Marineris on Mars. That's the biggest canyon in our solar system. Tell me water erosion caused that. I don't think so. I think that it was cosmic lightning, and I think that's what Ed's talking about with the kill shot. So again, if you're on the surface, it's going to be a hellacious time. Something I've always talked about, and in my last two books at great length, is what we call transiting the tail. Ed said we will go through the Planet X debris trail, and we're going to get hammered by it. And that is going to be a really, really tough time. Surface water is going to be polluted terribly during this. So you're going to need underground water cisterns, deep wells. And I'm talking about deep wells. You want to go way, way down. If you're in the water table, it could be polluted by that time. As to the pole shift, he potentially doesn't know for certain that there will be a pole shift, but he said it would be a pole shift of approximately 12 degrees, which is darn near exactly the same thing I predict. And it's not where the Earth flips head over heels. So we're talking about 12 degrees. And he's right. He doesn't know which way it would rotate, which way the shift is going to go. And neither do I.
Okay.
He doesn't know where the new poles are going to be. Neither do I. But the poles will shift. I think that an important thing, he made a statement that Earth's core is changing. It is heating up. They don't know why. They're not sure it's from PX. What we know is Greenland is melting. The ice is melting, and it's not because of solar, but it is because the bedrock is actually underneath the ice is warming. So this is something where you have an interaction between the between our binary stars. Nemesis, that's the core of what I call the Planet X system, and it has its own, constellation of planets and moons. One of them being Nibiru, the furthermost, or as the translation of the Sumerian, the planet of transit. And so I agree that it's not something where it's directly related to PX. I think that the Earth's core is heating because the sun is interacting with the approaching Planet X system, and then so we're basically a collateral damage issue. He says there will be a lot more volcanic and tectonic activity. There already is, and it will get worse. Oh my God. Please read Jennifer's Signs article on our website. We are documenting and following this, as I couldn't have said it better ourselves. Now,
what do you think is going to happen with Yellowstone?
Well, when I started my Cut to the Chase podcast in 2004, Jim Birkeland was my first guest, first two shows. We talked about that. Birkeland for me was important because I was in the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake that hit the San Francisco Bay Area, and he predicted that within minutes. And his thanks for that was he got canned. He was USGS geologist. And so we talked at length about that. And since 2004, I have followed Yellowstone very, very closely. Um, what, first off, Yellowstone, the last time it erupted, blew its cap. All right. And so you don't have the ability to have that kind of a destructive eruption again. It would be more along the line of multiple St. Helens creeping eruptions like you would see over in the Big Island of Hawaii. But something explosive that would take out the northern hemisphere, I don't see that in the offing. There's another super volcano that is not getting any attention. You know, what I see is that on one hand, we're being driven to Yellowstone like a drumbeat, Yellowstone, 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 and it has been on red alert. But the magma is displacing, it's shifting and moving. So it's showing signs that you're not having this single chamber buildup. On the other hand, Long Valley caldera there's a complete blanket on that. Nobody talks about it. And yet, that's the one that really bothers me, and that's in California. Long Valley has a single chamber, and it is inflating like a water balloon. And when that thing goes and it blows its cap, it is going to be arrivederci, the lower half, you know, from about San Francisco on down through California, going in Las Vegas, Arizona, New Mexico, and perhaps as far to the east as western Texas. And that for me is the one that is the real concern. But for Yellowstone, I see series of eruptions. I see trouble from that, just as we'll see from the Cascadia Range, but not a massive explosion.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for letting us know about that, because that is one of those things that the media does push big time as the possible end of the world scenario.
Well, if that's the case, why is FEMA using Kalispell, Montana to anchor its chain line of storage depots for emergency supplies, which is coming down? So, I mean, they're stitching all the way down. They know that's not going to happen. That's the reason why they're storing supplies out north and south of Yellowstone. So
Okay.
again, I just see that there's a lot of fear pushing at that, but it's not justified. Not from what I am seeing in the actual data that's coming across our desk. Again, Long Valley, that's the one to worry about.
Okay.
So there was one thing my source said that was interesting. It came to him initially, it presented himself as an inconsistency with Ed had in his presentation, but it was resolved. We're dealing with how long does it take once the Nemesis system reaches its point of perihelion. That's its closest distance to the sun in its orbit. And so you have pre-perihelion and then the post-perihelion leg. And the pre-perihelion leg, and I described this in very, very specific detail in my book, Surviving the Planet X Tribulation. It's a full color book with 142 color illustrations. And I walk the reader through this orbit trajectory very, very closely. And so above the ecliptic, the plane of our solar system, you have pre-perihelion, and then you have the post-perihelion leg. So you have that whole transit of how long does it take for Nemesis to literally whip around the sun. And in the morning session, Ed said that according to Carlos Muñoz Ferrada, and I've featured him in my work quite extensively. Brilliant man. He was the first one that actually announced the existence of Planet X in 1940, Chilean astronomer, a man with a golden heart. I stand on his shoulders. And he said, Ferrada said that it would take 57 years for Nemesis to whip around the sun, that our grandchildren might have to deal with it. However, in the afternoon, he was questioned by that, question about that by some folks in the audience, and he clarified it. And in the afternoon, he said that according to his remote viewing work, that it would take 6 months for the Nemesis Planet X system to whip around the sun. And he said, as a point of fact, you can either trust me and the work we've done, that it's 6 months, or trust Ferrata, that it's 57 years. And so that's how he handled that discrepancy.
It's a big difference.
Big difference. And his what his RV work of 6 months, completely consistent with what I have said in my last two books, Being in It for the Species and Surviving the Planet X Tribulation. Completely consistent. It could vary, you know. I think that, you know, people always want to put a date on a calendar. And have you ever heard of the Mandela effect?
Yeah. Do you think that's legit?
You know, I didn't know about that until my wife's been following that. And one day Jennifer and I were going through Costco and, you know, doing the Costco thing and, you know, get the little freebies. And she's telling me about this, and I'm going, boy, this is, you know, some kind of new popular theory. And I was a little skeptical. And so we're going back in the laundry soap section. But before we get there, she says, tell me something. Spell OxyClean. And I said, it's OXY. You know, clean. And she said, are you sure about that? And I said, yeah. I've been seeing OxyClean for most of my life, it seems like, you know. It's OXY. We go back in the laundry section. OXI. Okay. Then she goes, well, what about Curious George? Did he has a tail? I said, yeah, I love Curious George. Of course he has a tail. And then we went up and she actually, you know, when we got home, she showed me on, she said, where's George, you know, where's his tail? And all of a sudden, then all these other little inconsistencies, I can say, yeah, there's a shift in timeline. So the point here is that as we project out into the future, there's no doubt in my mind, the Mandela effect is real. There's no question in my mind. And that changes things to a certain extent, but it is not going to change the major events.
You know, I remember the Bernstein Bears being spelled with E, not Bernstein, and but here's what I got to throw out there, though. I mean, just because we see the differences in the names now, if we were to go back and look at the corporate logos and names, I mean, maybe they changed it to sell more for their marketing. I would have to really dive deep into that, because even Mr. Robot now, the TV series, which, by the way, is one of my favorite series that's out there right now, I think that they're really pushing a lot of agendas and what they're foreseeing the future might be like if there's a fiat reset currency, etc. And they're setting the stage for who to blame via Anonymous, etc. Yet they do have this specific, a couple of episodes where this FBI project that they're looking for the hackers in the series is called Project Berenstain, not Berenstein with an A. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and you know, my wife has been studying this, and she keeps pointing out these timeline differences again and again and again and again. And you know, I have the advantage of age. No, advantage is not the right word. Let's just say
you're an optimist. It's an optimistic way to look at it, you know? It's all mindset.
Yes, many, many hairlines ago. Yeah, no, things are changing, but this is changing in minor differences. The major differences, the major things, no. Is, you know, I've heard all of these. There was one theory that I heard in the conspiracy chat rooms that some guy up in Canada, I think, says that extraterrestrials stopped Nibiru in its tracks or deflected its orbit. And I'm going, Oh, please. You know?
Oh yeah, yes. There's Stuart Swerdlow said that back in 2003 we blew up Nibiru, so it wouldn't hurt us.
Right. Right. I mean, there's stuff that only wishful thinking, can give you any interest at all in those kind of nonsense explanations. But there's a lot of denial out there. Never underestimate the power of human denial. I mean, this is something I pointed out on my website, that when we do see Planet X in the sky, people are going to say, we hear all the time, when am I going to see it with my own eyes? When am I going to see it with my own two eyes? And to me, that's really a death question, because the right question is, when am I going to believe what I'm seeing with my own two eyes is a clear and present danger? The people who are saying, when am I going to see it, are going to be the same people that go, I'm not smart enough to understand what I am seeing, so I'm going to let someone else give me context for that and explain it to me, and trust that they're going to have my best interests at heart. And that's stupid. That's just stupid.
It's blind
Because
faith.
blind faith, because the people who are going to explain it, their strategy is real simple. They want you to die in place. They're going to say, don't worry about it. It's just going to be an interesting light show. It's nonsense. It's an artificial sun. It's whatever. And people that just are, oh, I don't want to hear about that. Life as I know it is coming to an end, and that this is a clear and present danger. They're just going to say, well, they wouldn't lie to me about something that big. And you ask these people, does the government lie to you about other things? Well, of course. But about something this big, they wouldn't lie. Really? Where is this threshold documented? Where does it say that liars are eventually going to come to Jesus and tell the truth? Give me a
Exactly.
break. But people are going to do it. So that's the whole question out there to your audience. Don't ask that question. When am I going to see it with my own two eyes? Because when you ask that of me, I just think you're stupid and you deserve to die, because you're not responsible for your own life, your own intellect, and putting your own context on it. There's only one right question. When will I believe what I am seeing with my own two eyes is a clear and present danger? That's the question. And that brings me to the next thing that Ed said in his morning presentation, that when Planet X is visible in the sky, it will appear as big as the moon. And that's pretty sizable given its distance. Now, here's something where Ed was very cagey. And I'm saved this as the last point of it. This is, as I understand, it was in the afternoon session. And he was asked about the Anunnaki. And regarding the Anunnaki, he was coy about that. He mispronounced the name and said, we thought at one time there were people on Planet X, but not anymore. And then he quickly changed the subject. Now, what your viewers need to understand, all right? Earlier I said, we're pushing the envelope all the time. Now, when Ed said regarding the Anunnaki, and he, completely was evasive, he had to. And here's the reason why. If you're talking about the Anunnaki historically, like Sitchin did, and there are a lot of modern authors, that's one thing. The minute you take Anunnaki, Planet X, and you pull it together in the same breath, you are French kissing the third rail. The elites will come at you and hammer you to pieces. I learned this after I published my book, Being in It for the Species, The Universe Speaks, because I detail what the Anunnaki are going to do at exhaustive length. Exhaustive length. And after I published that, I have been pummeled in many different ways. I can tell you that recently, my book, hackers went into my Ingram distribution account and completely disabled domestic sales of the book. Okay. And literally shut down sales of Being in It for the Species. They don't want the message to get out there. But that's also, in my new book, Surviving the Planet X Tribulation, I don't make any mention of the Anunnaki at all. You could say, arguably, yeah, I'm going to a faith-based audience, so I don't want to be off-putting to people of faith because they tend to, get real squeamish about mention of extraterrestrials. However, the truth be known, I took such a beating with Being in It for the Species. I was punished so badly for writing that book and publishing it. I didn't want to have that happen again to Surviving the Planet X Tribulation, because this is a last window of opportunity book to save lives. That's it. Ed is coming forward. He's really putting his neck out there. Okay. I mean, for those of you who think he was just doing a stunt to pull some cash, this guy really put his tuchus on the line to do what he did in 40 minutes. And I got a lot of respect for what Ed did. And, but there was something, call it a Freudian slip, that my source noted about the Anunnaki. And he made a joke 4 times, and everyone laughed at it each time. And he said ATs could give us technology, or this technology, that technology. And direct quote, it's just a question of how many women we have to give up. Let me repeat what he said. This direct quote. It's just a question of how many of our women we have to give up. And when I heard that, it was chilling. Because in my book, Being In for the Species, I document this. Not only are the Anunnaki coming for gold, they're coming for women. The women are young women, and they're going to be used in a breeding program to create a new slave race. And this is going to be a real shock for our entire planet. So again, you take Anunnaki, take Planet X, put it together in the same breath, you are French kissing the third rail. Ed couldn't do it in my last book. I sure wasn't going to do it either. Then after that, when Ed was promoting this event, he's talking Planet X and other enigmas. All right. And so he spent most of the day on the other enigmas. And if you want, I can briefly review those with you.
Hey, that'd be great. But one question I want to ask you real quick. You said he joked 4 times, and everybody laughed 4 times when he brought up the ETs. He said we could, trade tech. But did he bring up the fact that it just depends on how many of our women we have to give up every time also?
Yeah, he said that's the price we pay for the technology, how many women we have to give up.
And he used that same reference 4 times. That's
4 times.
Spooky. And if you really, that kind of reminds me of the book of Enoch and the Watchers and the Nephilim that's talked about. And if you look at these translations, I find it fascinating because, you can write anything and about anyone, literally. Whether it's, even if it's 20,000 years old, that doesn't mean that it's accurate because it's older. It could be a tabloid that's 20,000 years old, or one person saw it differently than another person, so that's how he put it down on paper. But I've never felt that when I've heard the official story of the Anunnaki basically, modifying the original Earth people to make them more intelligent, etc., I never bought that as the only reason, if even the reason at all, just because I think that if they had that kind of technology, they'd be able to use robots and androids and stuff like that. But nonetheless, I think that maybe they wanted something else that they couldn't get from robots, like you're talking about. Yeah, they could make an android for sex, but would it be the same? And then you look at the DNA and stuff like that. So that's very, very interesting to bring that up.
Well, let me talk to that because I've published my first Planet X article in January of 2002. And immediately after that, we found ourselves swirling in this controversy that Nancy Lieder and Zeta Talk, they were pumping up this story about a 2003 flyby of Nibiru that would be catastrophic for the Earth. And we published an article on it. You can find Zeta Talk or Zeta Hysteria. And it was a tough time for me and my researchers because a lot of people were following Nancy and this fellow by the name of Mark Hazelwood, who actually stole her work, her copyrighted work, and published a book called Blindsided. And the two of them really created quite a terrible panic. And people were writing us, and it was a very dark time because people are in their letters, they're trying to be cogent and well-reasoned, but the fear was just oozing out like mortar from bricks. And it was just heartbreaking to read it. It was a tough time. And in this, I was contacted by Zecharia Sitchin. And Sitchin was contacting me because he had come out with the book, The Lost Book of Enoch, or excuse me, The Lost Book of Enki. Slipped there. And I have read that book, and I will tell you that if you're going to read any book by Sitchin, that's the first one you want to read. Because Lord Enki, according to the Sumerian accounts, is the creator of us as a species. We literally came from his loins, from his seeds. We're a genetic outgrowth of him. This was his autobiography. It explains how the folks came from Nibiru to both Mars and to Earth. And he goes into great detail about how we came to be as a species. And the purpose for making us was to mine gold. And and if you read it, it's like Game of Thrones with horny aliens and spaceships.
That's why people like it so much.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
Yeah. It's exciting. It's a wonderful book to read. And Sitchin, the whole scare that was coming out from Hazelwood and Zeta Talk, Nancy Lieder, Sitchin was furious with it. And he called me and he said, look, they're selling a lot of my books, but people are saying that I am the one foisting this sham on the public and creating this needless hysteria. And he was very angry with Lieder, very angry with Hazelwood. And so I said, well, fine, I'll give you an interview on my site. And on the article, I'll give you editorial control. And boy, that was tough because that guy just, dotted his I's and crossed his T's. And we were, I think it was at the third or the fourth editorial cycle where he was editing his own edits. And I just said, that's it, we're going to press.
Right.
I published the article. And I had a chance to deal with him on a few other things and have a huge, huge, deep respect for Sitchin and what he did. We stand on his shoulders. He's quite a man. So the bottom line is that we're basically half Neanderthal, if you want, and half Anunnaki. And we're this hybrid race. I think that has had a mixed bag for us. We have a shorter lifespan because we're programmed to have a shorter lifespan. But on the other hand, we cycle through generations faster, which pushes the evolutionary process faster. From the Anunnaki, we inherited our intelligence and our lust and our greed. Boy, you read these people, like I said, it's Game of Thrones with horny aliens and spaceships.
It really is.
But I think, on the other hand, one of the things we inherited from our hominid ancestors was our spiritual capacity. One of the things we found in our research is that there are races that really do not like us because of our ability to channel across the galaxy. We can talk to the other end of the galaxy, whereas they can only do that within a soul, within a star system. That's about the extent of their distance. They can't go that far. Their telepathic powers are much more limited. I think that our telepathic powers is something we inherited from our hominid ancestors because they were grounded in Gaia, in the planet, and that is something that we inherited from them. But in the final analysis, we're all stardust. We all come from Creator. How we got to be here is irrelevant. We're here. And I love my species. People I got to take one at a time, but I love my species because if we don't love our own species, who will?
That's such a good way to put it. You have to take people one at a time, but as a species, I can certainly relate with you in that regard. Sometimes I wonder why I feel like I have to wake people up so much, and then I realize it's just a primordial thing, I feel, because, I'll tell you, Marshall, a lot of people, they're so ignorant to many things. When I say ignorant, I just mean uneducated, that I have a tough time relating with them to even have a regular conversation. I don't want to bring myself to that level. And I'm not saying I'm above them or below them. It's just a different frequency, a different vibrational frequency, essentially. So when you get to specific levels, you can pick up on certain energy and data packets that when you're in those other levels of, just, I guess, fear, fight, or flight mode constantly, and thinking that you have the entire universe solved oftentimes just on blind faith. I think that's the precursor to your own demise oftentimes is blind faith without doing the research into something, giving everything over to somebody or something without doing the research. Now, faith is a very powerful thing, very powerful, yet I think there needs to be balance there also.
It does, but that is the path. We're coming to a fork in the road. There's the Hopi prophecy rock, and it says if we continue on our current path, it's not going to go very well for us. But if we take an ascended path, it's a whole nother beautiful future. And we're at that fork of the road. We as a species have to decide, where this is going to go. Because do we survive as a species? Absolutely. Take that to the bank. 1 in 10 of us will see the end of the tribulation. Stop and think about that. Only 1 in 10. And to get there is going to take spiritual strength. You're going to have to walk from this end of the tribulation to the other end of the tribulation humbly with your God, or you're not going to make it. And that is really the essence of my book, Surviving the Planet X Tribulation, following that path. But, we have to, we have to decide, do we want a Star Trek future? Or do we want to be a bunch of filthy, scum-sucking Anunnaki stormtrooper slaves out there raping the universe? Sorry. Sometimes I'm a little emotional.
Good for you. That's what we need. Everybody should be like that. I think that that's super important, and oftentimes people are so docile to their surroundings, or they're worried about getting a little bit emotional because of what somebody else is going to say. How far do we want to let the system take advantage of us and our future generations? That's the question we all need to start asking ourselves. Whether or not you want to continue to allow this system to usurp up all your rights and continue to, look at these giant corporations that literally want you sick or dead. It just doesn't make sense. There needs to be, money's a good thing, but why not have businesses out there that are revolutionizing the industries of healthcare and creating systems of energy sources that don't just pillage the earth and fracking, etc. When I went out to these, where was it that I went out to in Texas? This place where these giant sinkholes are, and I saw it on the news. I went out there, and there was hardly anything out there but fracking, and there was some homes. It smelled so bad out there, Marshall, that I'm telling you, if you were prone to headaches or stomach aches, you'd only be able to last 5 seconds out there, and you'd start throwing up, and you'd get a migraine headache. I could handle it, but I'm telling you what, man, I can't imagine people living out there. It's got to be so bad for you.
Oh, man. I mean, it's like when I first started in this, it was before fracking, and I used to be able to tell people, hey, Pennsylvania, you know, where anywhere in Pennsylvania go. Then Tom Bridge came out and horribly fracked the state. I mean, this guy is the Dr. Death of fracking. I hope future generations remember him as the Mengele of death for this country, because entire swaths of the country are going to have this fracking issue. These wells have casings that are designed in an optimal world to last for 30 years. Some of them fail the day they go operational. Now, you start popping off major fault lines like New Madrid and Cascadia, San Andrea, they start going, these fracking wells are just boom. I mean, these big quakes, keep in mind, New Madrid was shaking, church bells in Pennsylvania during the 1800s when it popped the last time. So you have that kind of horizontal ground movement going through. Fracking wells are going to fail everywhere. At that point, water aquifers, land, everything. We're going to have entire dead zones that it'll take Mother Nature 100 to 200 years to clean up. So where are these people going to go and survive? I think between fracking and nuclear, has taken probably about 60% or better of survivable land areas off the table.
It's crazy. It's really madness. And, in closing out tonight, Marshall, let's think of a light note, something positive that we can take out into tomorrow, next week, next month, and something that will benefit society.
Well, there's one thing in my book, Surviving the Planet X Tribulation, I talk about that is a real point of hope. And people are always thinking about, well, I build a bunker, but now I have to power the bunker, okay? And diesel fuel and steam engines and all of these things. We know there's a lot of different alternative energy sources, but what we also know is that, these special interests have their watchdogs sitting right in front of the patent office. And the minute some patent comes through that challenges their little greedy empire, next thing you know, they have their government goons who will just, like good little doggies, go out there and do their dirty work for them. And they send out the government goons and confiscate all the equipment in the lab, destroy the lives of these inventors. Now, one of the first benefits of the tribulation is going to be these special interests and their government goons aren't going to be there. They're not going to be able to do that kind of suppression. And next thing we're going to see are Nikola Teslas popping up all across the country. And no one there to stop them for their own greedy reasons. They're going to be able to come up with fantastic new ideas for energy, medicine, construction, all kinds of things, and no one to stop them. Rex, in the midst of the tribulation and the darkness, this is the silver lining I see. We're going to have a technology renaissance because creativity is going to be set free. It's no longer going to be owned by the elites and their power cabals. That's going to be a beautiful thing to see.
That's what I'm talking about. And everybody now that we have that opportunity, I see it in front of us right now. If you go after certain factions, yeah, they're going to come down on you, and you have to be prepared for that as far as, trying to change a system or corporations basically control mechanism. But right. Regardless of that said, we do have an opportunity every single day to be the change we want to see. And that's so important. If we can do little things, like I said, even just little tiny keys to open up a door that will open up a bigger door and a bigger door, etc. Let's just take advantage of those opportunities. Let's be peaceful and respectful and build personal relationships with those in high positions of power and show them the benefits of having a system of balance, because you can only do so much and pillage so much before there's nothing left. It reminds me of that Dr. Seuss cartoon that came out a few years ago. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but this creature essentially creates this invention from using parts of Mother Earth, and then it uses it all up and there's nothing left. You know, it's like, well, wait, what do I do now? There's nothing else there. And it just had a really cool meaning on balance, in my opinion. So I certainly appreciate what you bring to the table, Marshall, and I look forward to reading all your books and updates. YOWUSA.com is an incredible website with your blog posts, your current events, and your books and knowledge available there. Appreciate you coming on the show with us here at the Leak Project, and look forward to speaking with you again soon.
As always, Rex, and you are the man.
Well, folks, I paid Marshall to say that, so thank you, Marshall. Much appreciated. And also, folks, check out leakproject.com. If you go to leakproject.com, you will have access to exclusive content. Also, pick up one of our new high-quality vinyl decals, Leak Project decals, and you'll also get a free membership at Leak Project. Go to youtube.com/clandestine Time Lord. You can also become a member there. Be safe and be the change you want to see. This is Rex Bear. Talk to you soon.